No, that's not the case.
Not yet. I'm mistaken.
That'll come up in a few minutes.
Okay, then we should go to our second speaker, then, should we not? The prospects and pitfalls of spiritual communities. Jerry, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Wes. And thank you very much, Laura. That was certainly the inspiration that I needed today, and hopefully others feel the same way. Our topic, the second half of the lecture today, is on the prospects and pitfalls of spiritual communities. From time immemorial, human beings have come together to pursue the spiritual path. There's nothing new about sanghas, ashrams, temples, churches, congregations, monasteries, nunneries, abbeys, convents, and lamaseries. From a theosophical standpoint, the entire human race is a sangham of souls, marching along the spiritual path. Human solidarity is one long march through the ages of the Manvantara. That so many are unaware of this fact is one of the great tragedies of our age, and the consequences of the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, the age of inversion. We use the imagery of a pilgrimage to represent the quest to unite with the spiritual sun, the source of light, life, and truth. But in the Kali age, under every rock is a serpent coiled, in the words of the voice of the silence. It is natural for people to support each other in the search for the truth. The family unit is a symbol of the universe's support of its parts. This archetypal pattern of parents and children symbolize the relationship between humanity and its spiritual preceptors. Humanity has a divine origin, and we are essentially mind beings whose fire of thought and feeling was lit by Promethean beings, parents, if you will, who come from previous cycles of evolution in the distant past. Fantastic as this may sound to contemporary ears, it is old news to our forefathers who took the trouble to enshrine it in the myths, legends, and stories of every ancient culture, and perhaps maintained in modern indigenous traditions. If the central challenge is to recover the universal perspective and knowledge of the immortal soul within, then joining a spiritual community offers a wonderful opportunity and also presents dangerous pitfalls. These too we wish to explore today. The Buddha clearly states that the central problem for humanity is separateness. Humanity, by and large, struggles under the weight of a separative sense of self. To break out of this confinement, human beings come together in spiritual communities to support the effort of moving towards wholeness. No matter how flexible and nimble a mind might be, there is still the tendency to follow beaten tracks. Thoreau compared this with the trail that led from his cabin down to Walden Pond, which was worn into the ground on the very first day of his building his 20 by 20 cabin. Some students might prefer the psychological angle, or the philosophical angle, or the metaphysical angle. Maybe we gravitate to the path of works, karma yoga, devotion, bhakti yoga, knowledge, jnana yoga. Perhaps we are strong in affirmation, the via positiva of the mystic, or we might be strong in the path of negation, via negativa of the ascetic or the Zen monk. But the standpoint of the soul is unitary. It is holistic and synthetic. The fellowship of students offers the individual the opportunity to blend their efforts with others. When perspectives are conjoined together, new and larger circles are formed. We accomplish this by seeing life and ideas through the eyes of others. It is good for the mind and for the heart. There's no point in limiting our family to only those of our immediate bloodline. This is another reason compassion and love are so strongly emphasized by great teachers. Another benefit of community is the wide exposure to the uplifting qualities like heroism, courage, insight, sacrifice, perseverance. With a community, there are simply more exemplars to learn from. A spiritual community of fellow seekers is lifted up on the shoulders of those who make noble sacrifices. The spiritual path requires a village. One needs brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers to assist and guide us along the way. There is also a solitary component to this journey. After all, the self of all creatures can be viewed as deep within our own consciousness. No one can do our thinking for us. No one can tame the appetites in our place. Virtues are not acquired by osmosis, but through our own trials and effort. We are responsible for our own choices. Each one must untie their own knots, the knot of self, and face head-on the dweller on the threshold, the selfish ego. There is a dialectic between community and solitude that must be respected in the spiritual community. American Indian tribe traditions understood this and required a period of solitude in the wilderness for those crossing over into adulthood. The idea of the vision quest forced the individual to rely upon herself or himself to complete the transition. There is a divine dance between within and without, captured in these beautiful lines of the Voice of the Silence, which Primo will read for us.
Thou shalt not separate thy being from being and the rest, but merge the ocean in the drop within the ocean. So shalt thou be in full accord with all that lives. Bear love to men as though there were they brother pupils, disciples of one teacher, sons of one sweet mother. Of teachers there are many. The master soul is one, Alaya, the universal soul. Live in that master as its ray in thee. Live in the fellows as they live in it. Thank you.
The value of a spiritual community is the opportunity to celebrate the achievement of others. It is the opportunity to find ways to help and assist one's fellow students. Within a spiritual community, the rough edges of competition, jealousy, and judgmentalism can be sanded down. All of this works in favor of reducing the ego to a cipher. The more sincere we are in our quest, the more the light shines on the forgotten corners of our own nature. In this regard, every pilgrim soul needs someone to tell them the truth, whether they want to hear it or not. Krishna warns in the Bhagavad Gita, he should raise the self by the self. Let him not suffer the self to be Lord, for the self is the friend of self. In like manner, self is its own enemy. Emerson said, trust thyself. Hawthorne warned, watch thyself. We need both. Let us switch now to the other side of the coin. What are the pitfalls of spiritual communities? What do we need to watch out for? How can they go wrong? What is the deeper aim and purpose of spiritual life? Is it merely the quest for happiness, peace of mind? Is it mastery of esoteric information or health of the body? Spiritual life must be more than this. When we use the word spiritual, we are talking about the consciousness of the universe, the immortality of the soul, the interconnectedness of all life. How can we awaken this fundamental reality? The Irish Theosophist A.E. called it the inexpressible yearning of the inner man to go out into the infinite. A spiritual life requires a broader appreciation of the metaphysics of spiritual evolution. If the separative sense of self is the problem, then anything that we do to expand that feeling of isolation and disconnection is walking backwards. Let us look at several spiritual communities that swerved off the path and became cautionary tales. The story of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh is one such tale. There's an excellent Netflix documentary called Wild, Wild Country that is well worth watching. The three main temptations in any spiritual community revolve around sex, money, and power. The utopian society and city this group sought to build in Central Oregon in the 1980s suffered from problems with all three. Idealistic themes of peace and love were combined with eclectic selections from the world's great religious traditions to create a message very attractive to Westerners. But to this equation was added a certain level of irreverence for tradition and an embrace of modern materialism. Bhagwan taught his disciples that since the world is merely an illusion, there was no reason to be ashamed of wealth and luxury. It wasn't real, so why fret over it? Secondly, he taught that sex was another pathway to enlightenment and opened the doors to highly hedonistic ethic. Free love was the order of the day without common sense restrictions. His accumulation of Rolls-Royce cars became legendary. You have to wonder, how can one person, or what can one person really do with 70 Rolls-Royces? He celebrated them like a red badge of courage, spitting in the face of Indian traditions of self-control and non-possession. But his personal charisma and charm, his brilliant oratory, his command of Western thought, and calm demeanor captivated his followers. Being in his presence transported people almost hypnotically. His worldwide following grew to almost 500,000. What is interesting is the whole edifice of the community rested squarely on his personality. And as he went, so went the community. Residents of the nearby town of Antelope were threatened by the strangeness of it all and sought to limit their influence. This led to various power struggles, not only with local authorities, but with county and state government. Things got so bad that the spiritual community armed themselves to the teeth and formed a small militia to defend themselves from outsiders. A power struggle ensued that unveiled pervasive wiretapping and surveillance systems used to monitor the group's behavior and fend off rebellion. The struggle for power and control of the group internally and pushing back against the forces from the outside led to a level of self-preservation that was devoid of any ethical principle. Any means available were fair game if it meant gaining advantage and control. The group fell apart under the weight of legal problems, Bhagwan's paranoia, and infighting amongst its own members. This indeed is a cautionary tale. The second scenario to learn from and talk about, as sad as it may be, has to do with a group of communities in the Tibetan Buddhist community in the United States. Katie Butler wrote a powerful essay called Encountering the Shadow in Buddhist America. She recounts the tale of several High Lamas whose lives came unraveled. Coming from a very regimented monastic culture, these lamas found themselves without any guardrails in licentious America. She writes about 4 common elements found on the shadow side of these Tibetan Buddhist communities. Number 1, patterns of denial, shame, secrecy, and invasiveness reminiscent of alcoholic families. soft peddling of basic Buddhist precepts against the harmful use of alcohol and sex, an unhealthy marriage of Asian hierarchy and American license that distorts the teacher-disciple relationship, a tendency, once scandals are uncovered, to either scapegoat the disgraced teachers or blindly deny that anything had happened. Some of the lamas fell on the deep end with alcohol and intimate relations with their students. In spite of the obvious problem, disciples were willing to give their teachers a pass due to their great gratitude for their clear and penetrating lectures. She discovered that as soon as the teacher jumped off the guardrails concerning money or alcohol, there were subordinates at the ready to pick up the pieces, just like a wife of an alcoholic husband might cover a bounced check or bail him out of jail. In AA circles, this is called enabling. The teacher never had to suffer the consequences of his actions, she said. One particular lama claimed that he was completely in control. It was only his lower nature that was acting up. When the behavior of this particular Rinpoche became public, the senior regent himself suppressed any public discussion of the crisis. A medical professional said, Rinpoche was certainly not an ordinary Joe, but he sure did die as an alcoholic, as an average alcoholic. I've never seen anyone in this condition that wasn't in this condition that drank uninterruptedly. His denial that he ever had a problem was bone deep. The pro-Rinpoche supporters practiced themselves what the author called devotional or transcendental denial. Lamas in Tibet are accorded tremendous devotion and power, but their freedoms to do so, or to do as they please, are rigidly guarded by monastic vows of chastity and abstinence, and by the sanctity of the order supported by one's fellow lamas. She writes, Katie Butler, while America removed all social limits from the Rinpoche's behavior, his students became his household servants, chauffeured his car, and showed him a deference appropriate to a feudal lord. This parody of Asian deference, combined with American license, ultimately proved disastrous, sometimes acting freely, meaning drinking, spending money, making sexual advances to women and men, all with precious little negative feedback. The deference went so far beyond what would have been granted a teacher in Japan or Tibet. Idealizing the teacher is an important part of a long, healthy tradition in Tibet, Japan, and India. But Eastern cultures are far more articulate in spelling out the boundaries of this devotion. When a teacher makes a mistake or fails, Eastern cultures will continue to defer superior rank, but quietly withdraw affection and respect. The Dalai Lama shared these thoughts at a conference in Newport Beach not long ago. Part of the blame lies with the student, he said, because too much obedience, devotion, and blind acceptance spoils a teacher. Part also lies with the spiritual master, because he lacks the integrity to be immune to that kind of vulnerability. I recommend never adopting an attitude toward one's spiritual teacher of seeing his or her every action as divine or noble. This may seem a little bit bold, but if one has a teacher who is not qualified, who is engaging in unsuitable or wrong behavior, then it is appropriate for the student to criticize that behavior, he said. Yet again, the spiritual community of Rinpoche disbanded. Friendships were broken, and many lost their interest in Buddhist practice altogether. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second and give the rest of what I need to say without slides. Excuse me for the delay here. This third scenario I wanted to describe is one from my own experience. The story of the spiritual group I belonged to over 30 years ago highlights critical lessons and patterns on the topic we are discussing today. I'm not relying entirely on my own observations of events. I checked the facts and details stated here against the testimonies of dozens of my brothers and sisters in this group, all of which were firsthand experiences. Many of these interviews took place over the past 6 months in preparation for this lecture. Other interviews with key people that are now past took place years ago. I checked and double-checked these accounts like a good journalist might do. For the protection of the innocent, I will tell this story without using any names or places. Our spiritual group most certainly had a leader. He was a brilliant, charismatic college professor, eloquent beyond measure, a profound intellect, well-versed in theosophical philosophy and all philosophies, East and West, for that matter. We were riveted every time he spoke. Lectures on campus were full to overflowing on almost every occasion, and refreshingly inspirational and uplifting. On campus, the message was one of self-reliance, thinking things through for yourself, the quest for wisdom, infinite human potential, and the civilization of the future. It was my first exposure to ideas so grand and bold in scale. I joined a small local spiritual community founded by this professor. Within our group meetings, he spoke with deference with the great teachers of the past, infinite human potential, and the spiritual path. The core teachings of responsibility, service, and devotion were stressed. He wore the same suit continuously and drove a beat-up old Plymouth Valiant, which secured the impression of detachment from possessions and a disdain for worldly attachments. We were inspired beyond measure. Our heartstrings were all vibrating to the tune of universal enlightenment, the civilization of the future, and human solidarity. Our beginnings in my young eyes were noble and authentic. I took an entire year off from college to travel the country alone to make sure that the gravitational pull this man and this group had on me were self-chosen and not some form of a magic charm. The spiritual group formed a collective and established a communal housing system. People donated their homes and their savings to the work. The devotion of the group was profound, to say the least. People paid what they could for their housing. Our communal housing group grew to around 150 members, most of them families, many with children. Many others from local surroundings joined into our activities. The group swelled to several hundred. We acquired a prominent heritage property, which we painstakingly renovated into office spaces, a community educational center, and a full-scale printing operation functioning seemingly around the clock. It was exciting and exhilarating to be part of, to see what was possible when people pulled together for a lofty cause. Our individual energies put together created synergy. But signs of cracks started to appear. Subtle and insidious, there was a shadow side gathering to our endeavor, a shadow side that would eventually expand and tear the whole infrastructure down. Ever so gradually, the emphasis started to shift. Our teacher was a married man with a wife and one school-aged child. His wife was a brilliant teacher in her own right, fluent in theosophical philosophy and the world's religions. Little did we know that behind the scenes, this marriage was not as harmonious as it might have seemed. In the early years, the focus was on the great teachers of the past and the contributions of HPB and Mr. Judge of the modern Theosophical movement, we were encouraged to revere the teachers who were the custodians of the Gupta Vidya, the hidden wisdom. But little by little, the focus shifted to our own teacher, who naturally was influencing us the most, and whose words and ideas drew us into the group in the first place. In the early years, this man was our generally acknowledged spiritual teacher, whose instructions were communicated from weekly lectures and monthly articles in a magazine we published. Gradually, over time, this status, through these communications, changed. From wise elder, that was the unequivocal leader of our group, he was elevated to the messenger of our cycle. From the messenger to world teacher, from world teacher to Mahatma, from Mahatma to teacher of Mahatmas, from teacher of Mahatmas to the reincarnation of Krishna, and lastly, from avatar to avatar of avatars. To give evidence of these changes, consider this excerpt from a letter sent to all the members of the commune in July of 1988. It is astounding and profoundly gratifying that so many millions in this country and around the globe are tired of the rat race, the lure of filthy liquor, the deceptive glamour of passing pleasures, the false burden of pseudo-intellectualism, and every kind of phoniness. The avatar of the age and of all time came to terminate all of these for the sake of freedom and spiritual privacy of all souls wishing to enter the great silence of ascetic self-introspection, joyous relaxation in voluntary labor, mental and manual, and the delicate dialectical art of gaining sovereign skill in the wise use of time, money, and noetic energy, from the founder-president. Such grandiose claims would be entirely forgivable if they were true. Who wouldn't want the avatar of avatars to enter the scene in their lifetime, in their country, and in their own town? But alas, there was a powerful evidence to the contrary that we found too painful to face and lacked the self-reliance to heed. Sadly, we discovered the teacher was leading a double life. Funds were secured from select members of our group under false pretenses to support the duplicity. Reports of unethical activity behind the scenes began to pile up. A major scandal at the university revealed that a key member of our group was working at the school using university funds and resources for the benefit of our communes and the teacher's desires, all of which was embarrassingly covered extensively in the local press. Some began to suspect that being a guru above reproach privately, some began to suspect that being a public guru above reproach and privately living with so many ethical compromises would have a damaging effect on one's psyche. In many respects, this is a challenge for every spiritual aspirant, not only its teachers. There's always a gap between the ideal one is seeking and what one is actually practicing. Short of enlightenment, every aspirant is leading something of a double life. The question has to do with the degree. Is the gap widening or shortening? Herein lies one of the central lessons of spiritual communities. One of the reasons we come together is to keep each other honest. Human nature is such that we naturally struggle with blind spots and holes in our perceptions. There are powerful tendencies in our ego nature to edit out what is unpleasant and inconvenient and to maintain a prideful image of ourselves. Our friends, family, children, and fellow students make it more difficult to hide inside these ego-protecting disguises. But when a spiritual teacher is elevated by a group to godlike levels, unfortunately claims of infallibility creep in, and no principle of self-correction can be found. This happened frequently in Tibetan Buddhist communities in America, discussed earlier, and it was repeated in our group as well. No one dared to confront unethical activity when it occurred. Even when a few did, they were rationalized away as part of some secret initiation or some prefabricated loyalty test to the teacher. Those who spoke out were ostracized and marginalized. Behind the scenes, a different story was playing out. Our group had a definite hierarchy, and many of us longed for more contact with the teacher, assignments from the teacher, and to be part of the inner circle. But the inner circle was in turmoil. A group of women, handpicked from our group to provide all sorts of secretarial and organizational duties, were being tormented in a variety of ways. The psychological damage became so extreme that one of the husbands privately summoned the courage to appeal to our teacher to cease and desist, but nothing seemed to work. We had conceded infallibility to our teacher, and infallibility is intoxicating. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, said Lord Acton. Another object lesson from our experience is the insidious desire to be special that creeped into our thinking. We had a wonderful group of people. Our group was indeed highly educated and an accomplished ensemble with many college instructors in our midst. But little by little, we gave into the false notion that we were special, somehow more blessed than others. We had to be. We were part of this wonderful movement. It became a form of group hypnosis. Interestingly, this issue of claiming special status was touched upon by the teacher himself in a speech he gave in Toronto in 1972 when he wrote, "There never was a suggestion, and there never could be, that any act of association with any theosophical organization, even by long years of study and involvement with theosophical text, even by long years of ethical and mystical training along theosophical lines, that a person somehow has privileged access to the wisdom religion. No man can speak as its sole custodian or its ultimate authority. No man can claim that he is any different from other men. The very thought of separation becomes for him a wall, a barrier that will divide him both from other men and also, alas, sometimes unknown to him, but painfully so, separate from the great custodians of the wisdom religion," unquote. Yet this potent observation was precisely the pit that both our group and our teacher stepped into less than a couple of years later. And the evidence for this is the exalted status the teacher was seeking from us and our willingness to concede it. Our group believed we had privileged access to the teacher of the century and his teachings. We sought to be unconditionally devoted. It was a dangerous mix, claims of grandeur and devotees anxious to concede it. Evidence of this special privileged status comes from an article written by the teacher in 1981 when he wrote, "At the present historical moment, there is a rapid descent of Dharmakshetra into Kurukshetra, and an awesome reenactment before the soul's eye of the titanic struggle between Kronos and Zeus, to serve the masters and their avatar, and through them all humanity, is the most meaningful and precious privilege open to any person." Having these special privileges fueled our devotion and work habits. We were convinced that working for the teacher was working to save humanity, but the priority had changed. Teacher first, humanity second. These changes should have provided us with adequate warnings, but our growth and popularity silenced the alarm signals. Our publishing operation was humming, and on the surface everything appeared to be clean and above board, but elaborate steps were being taken to both hide and justify the ever-increasing erratic behavior of our teacher, who is living a double life: exalted spiritual teacher publicly, troubled soul privately. Excessive phases of intense work kept many people trying to function on little to no sleep. Children were neglected, marriages were strained, day jobs sacrificed, all in the mad attempt to keep up with all the meetings and the projects assigned by the teacher. Thousands of hours, for example, were consumed by teams of women removing tiny scratches and minor blemishes from the publications coming out of the presses. The work going on late into the night, many days of the week. Some of these women had very young children at home. Despite the fact that we had as many as 5 meetings a week, The teacher kept founding new organizations with yet more meetings to attend. The Maitreya Sangha, the Pythagorean Academy, the Hermes Vinaya Trust, just to name a few. We were unaware how the system works, keeping its members too busy to think, to meditate, withdraw, or spend time with family. We became spiritual workaholics. Little did we know, or perhaps little were we prepared to admit, we were caught in a hurricane of manic activity, which could not be sustained. The teacher went on wild buying sprees for cars and other luxury items. Even brothers and old friends of his, who had been eager to help, backed away, saying that they could not support such activities. The eloquent, inspirational messages of the early years were replaced with diatribes, complaints, and grievances. The devolution was not sudden. These trends occurred incrementally over time until they were hard to ignore. Inside the group, we could not see the imbalances all that often, but outsiders found them obvious. The strain mounted. What was once golden, insightful, meaningful, uplifting, and spiritual had become near the end, for so many, heavy, banal, meaningless, and depressing. Eventually, it all came crashing down around us. News of an affair, the hospitalization concerning a bipolar disorder, the misappropriation of funds, as well as lies, cover-ups, and deception became common knowledge. A meeting was convened to voice concerns and complaints. Family members with the closest knowledge of the teacher's ways were compelled to confirm the truth of many of the rumors revolving around the family and our group. His story bears many similarities with that of John Nash, captured in the wonderful book, A Beautiful Mind. A spiritual community of several hundred students rapidly decreased to fewer than 20. Spirits were crushed, friendships broken, family members were at odds with each other while sorting out the wreckage, leaving a trail of tears and broken hearts rather than a nucleus of universal brotherhood and sisterhood. Years of our lives, personal savings, homes, time with family, inheritances, and the professional careers had all been sacrificed for a noble cause that turned sour and became more personal than universal in many cases. The emotional and psychological damage for so many is impossible to describe and persists to this day. The spiritual community mainly dissolved, with the vast majority of the group losing all interest in Theosophy whatsoever. One of the key object lessons from these events is one must never abandon one's own best judgment. In the end, we are seeking to build a bridge between the higher and the lower self. A teacher can offer guidance, but we must do the work. All true teachers, I believe, preach self-reliance, reliance on the self within. Krishna says as much in the Bhagavata Purana. The Atman is the guru par excellence. And self-reliance would have protected us from our teachers and our own excesses. Authority figures and respected elders considered, nothing we do should bypass our conscience, our own inherent sense of right and wrong. Human nature has a divine and a selfish component. We must aspire to the first and beware of the second. Neither can be neglected if we are to grow in human solidarity. These stories of spiritual communities gone astray are cautionary tales. Whenever we come together on occasions like these, we become for a moment a spiritual community. We have the opportunity to send out a healing vibration to our sisters and brothers throughout the world. Going forward, the talisman of spiritual life and spiritual communities must be self-reliance and ethics. When we deviate from the ethical, it should give us cause to think and to question. Are we becoming more compassionate, more calm, more kind? In a spiritual community, are we more patient, more forgiving, more considerate? If that is the direction we are moving, we must be on the right path. Sharing the teachings of the wisdom tradition is the obligation of the sincere student. But long before a single word is uttered, we ought to profess our philosophy in deeds and actions, not lectures and sermons. The most powerful way to share the blessings of great ideas is through example. Theosophy is as Theosophy does, we are told. Every parent knows this. To embody an idea is the golden way and the most difficult. This is perhaps where the very notion of integrity comes from. I think for us to grow in solidarity, we must come to see these priorities. Character is more important than intellect. Honesty is more sterling than eloquence. Integrity is more powerful than charisma. The ends do not justify the means. These lessons can be drawn from these stories today. Our work and our contributions to a spiritual community must be self-chosen to get the motive right. Karma will not be mocked. What is built on faulty foundations will eventually fall. Only the truth endures. Thank you very much for listening.